On behalf of the Lightspeed and Axios teams, thank you. We love having you here. My name is Guru Chahal. I'm a partner with Lightspeed Venture Partners. We're a global venture capital firm. We manage about $30 billion in assets under management today. We operate across all geos worldwide. Wherever you find technical innovation, you'll hopefully find a Lightspeed partner looking to work with some amazing founders. We invest across sectors, across enterprise, across consumer, across healthcare, across fintech. And 25 years ago, when we started the firm, at the time, we were very early stage enterprise focused, but today that purview has expanded across all of those sectors. And we are one of those very fortunate firms that have seen the evolution of technology across some amazing multiple cycles, across the internet, where we got our start, across the mobile cycle, across the cloud wave, and now we've been investing behind AI for over the last decade. Much accelerated over the last 2 years, of course. To give you a sense for the numbers, we've probably deployed about $2.2 billion in AI native companies across all layers of the stack. Those are foundation models, the silicon they run on, the applications that are built on top across various sectors. We support about 100 plus companies in AI native ecosystems today. But as with all cycles, it's a combination of some amazing innovation and value that's created, but also some hype. And so I'd like to invite our collaborators at Axios and Dan to help us cut through that. Great.
Appreciate it. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out today. My name is Dan Primack, business editor at Axios. Unlike Lightspeed, I have invested $0 in any AI companies, but I have written about all of them. So we're going to be two things quickly. First, just so you all know, we will have another session here tomorrow at the same time. We hope to see you all back here. And I'd like to invite our first guest, which is Lynn Martin, president of the New York Stock Exchange.
Thank you.
Hey.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Thank you for being here in this cozy little spot.
In your Swiss chalet.
In my Swiss chalet. We were going to do this in Swiss German, but then we both realized we don't speak it, so we will not do that.
Right.
So, Lynn, let me start with this. We're kind of in year 3 of the AI hype cycle, but we're also in year 3 of IPOs are coming back this year. You run the New York Stock Exchange. Why is 2015 going to be different than, say, 2014?
2014.
I'm sorry. 2000. Wow. I am clearly
jet lagged. That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. Why will it be different than 2014?
I don't have my stats on 2014. Yeah. I don't know if we are in year 3 of the IPOs are coming back hype cycle, because 2022 is a challenging year, and it felt like it was going to be a challenging year, mainly because we saw that volatility start to ramp back up in 2022. And unfortunately, almost 2 years ago, there was the Ukraine, or almost 3 years ago, there was the Ukraine invasion by Russia. Reasons to be optimistic for 2025. This is the year IPOs come back. Look at 2024. 2024, you did see the green shoots of the IPO markets come back. And if we look at the IPOs that happened on the New York Stock Exchange, in secondary trading, in aggregate, they are 58% above their IPO price. Now, that's a darn good stat. It means that there is investor demand. And when the right companies come to market, they see that value accretion. We're so proud that 9 of the top 10 IPOs from a performance perspective last year happened on our platform. But a tremendous amount of capital got raised last year. When you consider that we had a U.S. election, a pretty controversial U.S. election that ebbed and flowed throughout the course of the year is probably the right way to phrase it, causing volatility in markets. What that meant for the IPO markets is it felt really good up until June, and then the market open, shut throughout that election period. We've got some deals on the road. We had an IPO last week that also performed really well. A company called Flowco in the LNG and energy space, priced at $24 and closed Friday at $30. So again, green shoots are there.
When I say we in the press, we always look for companies that are going public and then say, oh, that's tailwinds. Like they did it and thus others are going to follow.
Right.
You have a big one on the road right now, Venture Global, which is
Yep.
an LNG company, not an AI company, not a tech company. Could be literally $1 billion IPO. Do you view that as one that, if successful, will have tailwinds for other companies, or is that really more of a one-off because it's not unique, but relatively unusual, and it's maybe a little bit like what ARM was a year ago or a year and a half ago? It kind of stands on its own.
It does stand on its own because of the size of that IPO. I mean, they're talking around $100 billion valuation at IPO, which is
So like a small AI company.
exactly. But importantly, you think about it. You think about what is coming out of the U.S. Some of the initial signs of what President Trump is going to do. The LNG sector is really well positioned.
So you talk about green shoots, and you're right. So a lot of the companies that did decide to go public last year priced well. They've traded better in the aftermarket. But David Solomon, good standing member, his company Goldman Sachs, he said, quote, the other day at a Cisco event, quote, "It is not fun being a public company. Who would want to be a public company?" End quote, says CEO of public company. Your response to David, why would anyone want to be a public company? It's not fun.
Well, to address the not fun part, I think the next administration, this administration that got sworn in yesterday, is going to look at some of the reasons it's not fun. You know, the additional tax, if you will, on public companies, additional disclosures. Now, no one is questioning the need for accurate financial disclosures. That's good. That's good table stakes. But there's been a variety of other regulations that have been layered on top of public company CEOs over time. So it does appear that this administration is going to look at that. Nothing really beats the liquidity and depth of the U.S. public markets. That's the reason to go public. Democratization of investor.
Yeah.
Right? But what it means is I think companies are probably going to stay private a bit longer. And when they come to market, they're going to be better companies, better, higher quality companies that actually tap the public markets.
Do you feel you are, when I say you, the stock exchange and exchanges maybe even globally, are competing now with private capital in a way they never did? It used to be private capital, it was almost hand in hand. Private capital, helped a company get to you. Now it seems like they're often stopping a company from getting to you.
I don't view them as competition. I still view the private markets as an important partner. A company, when they're seeding an idea, should not be a public company. Right. They're still in startup phase. They're still investing in the next great initiative, the way to make the world better. And when you're in full-on investment mode in your business and trying to get your product to market and get critical mass of adoption for your product, it's probably not the greatest time to tap the public markets. You're very focused on, building still. And I think the private markets play an incredibly important role.
Do you feel, is there any concern, the thinking used to be that one of the reasons that people like to buy into IPOs was because you were still buying into a big, as an investor, you were buying into a growth story, that some of these companies, if they get so long in the tooth, that at least the rapid growth has all been, all the benefit to that has gone to the private investors? Or not all, but a lot of it. A lot more of that growth is now staying on the private side than the public, because they are.
Look at a company like Reddit last year. Yeah. Their IPO, their valuation at IPO day was $7.5 billion. Sure. It's now 30.
Yep.
They're a great example of a well-known household name. Viking Cruises. That was another great IPO last year. The more industrial sector, UL. The more tech sector, Rubrik with their with their cyber defense platform. These are companies that are new, hot startups, still have that great growth trajectory, still are on that hockey stick journey, that the public can now participate in that hockey stick journey. One
other thing Solomon said, and then I won't keep talking about him, is he was talking about what it took to bring company public. He said the work of drafting an S1 used to take a 6-person team, 2 weeks to complete for the banks, but now AI can do 95% of that in minutes. Cost, quote unquote cost, is one reason why companies often say we don't want to go public, or are the costs overall going to come down, including from the exchange, because AI and technology can do a lot of the work that people used to have to do?
I don't know how the cost will definitely be impacted, but I don't know how. really where you see the costs are that regulatory tax that I was talking about. And it's still early days.
Yeah.
We're on day one, basically, of this next administration.
If Scott Bessent, the presumptive Treasury Secretary, came to you and said, Lynn, you get to be queen for a day. What's the one thing you want to do? We can get this either through Congress or through regulation. What's the one thing you would want him to do?
I would want there to be a glide path for companies who are newer startup companies that have a path to the public markets that don't necessarily have the full-on tax of being a public company. Not financials. I think financial disclosure is incredibly
So what's an example?
important.
What's something you think that a company today has to do?
If you look at some of the ESG, which I'm sure that's a regulation that'll be looked at, some of those forced disclosures, I think that's an area I'll probably be looked at.
Well, let's talk about AI. You obviously personally have a background in neural networks. That's kind of, you're not a financier by trade or training originally. What is a tangible example of how the New York Stock Exchange is using AI internally?
We process 750 billion incoming order messages a day, buy, sell, and match trades come into our platform. We can't do that with humans. Can't find enough humans to process that without using good technology. So we've been using AI from our regulatory team to spot nefarious behavior in our markets, and then have that as an output to our humans, to allow our humans to do higher value add work, as opposed to crunching, here's a message, here's another message.
Do you think you're catching more than you would have caught 3-4 years ago?
We absolutely are.
That's interesting. Does that, you hear two arguments when it comes to AI, when it comes to labor. You hear the one, it's going to replace everybody. The other is it's going to actually create more work. Do you feel, for example, when it comes to, don't have the people crunching the emails, right, as you said, but do you have more people almost on the enforcement side because you are seeing more
We have
stuff?
people doing higher value added work than they did in the past.
You talk about the importance of having, quote, high quality data. I think that's the term you use a lot.
Yeah.
What practically does that mean? What is high quality data compared to, I guess, low quality data?
High quality data is data that can be trusted. I mean, to me, it's just about trust. Is it data that is the golden source? If you have data that is not the golden source that seeps into the models, you're going to get probably unfortunate outcomes.
How do you...
But you also need the human to make sense of the outcome of the AI.
When you say the golden source, how do you, or how does New York Stock Exchange, how do you determine one from the other? Because I would think bad data, how can I put this? If it is good bad data, it is disguised to look like good data.
Well, that's where we apply AI selectively to data that we know is trusted in our platforms. We don't just apply AI everywhere because we're very deliberate on the data that we apply it to.
Yeah. What can you do? When you talk about being able to crunch those, I assume you've been able to do that for a little while. Is there something that you've been able to add, say, in the past year? When we think of how quickly AI is advancing, is there something you've been able to add in the past year that you couldn't, say, do a year ago, just because technology's got advanced?
We're using AI in a couple of other areas at our parent company, which is another area I'm quite passionate about, ICE, yeah. So we've been using AI there to add liquidity to our energy markets for quite some time. We have LLMs that are embedded within our proprietary chat platform, which understand if I'm talking to you about the Swiss chalet we're sitting in, or if I'm talking to you about a crude oil trade, and if it detects the crude oil trade, it will pop through some value-added analytics that we produce internally, and then allow you to submit that to the trading platforms. We've seen the amount of activity generated, still early days, but the amount of activity generated in our energy markets really do this really nice compounding growth.
Do you think this
that adds liquidity to markets?
That makes sense. Do you feel 2025 is going to be the year that we see a true AI, I don't mean AI native, AI focused company come to market? I mean, I know there's some that are talking about it. Are we going to see, every company is now using AI, applying AI, including legacy companies, but a company that we would kind of all say, oh, that is a AI company, not just a company that uses it?
I don't know. I think the jury is still out as to who's coming to market. I think the people that are tapping the public markets are the more traditional companies, the ones that you understand. I do think the energy sector, given the demands of AI on power, is very much related to AI, but to your point, they're not a true AI company.
That makes sense. You and I were on stage in New York in May, and it was just days before the U.S. trading systems moved to T+1 settlements. And
yes.
There was questions of, is this going to work? And it did, with relatively few hiccups. Does the rest of the world, like Switzerland, does the rest of the world need to move to T+1 before the U.S. can start going to T+, or begin working toward T+0?
Well, we're pretty happy we got to T+1 as quickly as we did. I don't know what I think the U.S. is on a different path from probably the rest of the world. One of the areas we're focused on is the elongation of our trading day. We announced in September that we were moving to 22.5 on our electronic trading platform, mainly because our clearinghouse, DTC, had started to allow trades in the elongated session. Now, there's liquidity that had developed overnight outside of the exchange ecosystem, but importantly, it wasn't guaranteed by a clearinghouse and it wasn't guaranteed by hardened infrastructure. So we're really focusing on getting that done this year.
Why 22 instead of 24?
We match the clearinghouse.
Why are the clearinghouses? 22 seems like such an odd, arbitrary number. Like 9 makes sense, 8 makes sense, but 22, like 22? There's
a
People
moment
go
in
home
time.
for 2 hours.
There's a moment in time where their systems had to recycle. So we're working with them too to see if it's possible to elongate further.
Give me one.
But we're always going to follow the clearinghouse because to our.
Do you think the clearinghouses will the systems be able at some point soon be able to reboot a little quicker? That seems like a long time for systems.
Possibly. I mean, we've run futures exchanges that operate 23/5 around the globe, and we can recycle our clearing systems pretty quickly.
Give me one, say, macroeconomic signal that you look at and pay attention to that you think the average bear doesn't pay attention to.
Well, everyone's paying attention to inflation, right? Yep. Everyone's paying attention to interest rates. I pay attention to volatility. The VIX is a key indicator that I pay attention to because to me that's a barometer of if the market is stable from an IPO perspective.
That makes sense. Last question for you. You've come to Davos before. I'm a newbie. This is my first trip here. I've been here for like 48 hours.
You having fun?
I am having fun.
Good.
It's been good so far. I haven't slept nearly enough. For other people who are like me, do you have a Davos hack?
Drink a lot of water because you're in the mountains.
I don't realize that as much, right?
I don't know. And you're talking so much, and you. The great thing about Davos is everyone is here and you have the ability to interact with so many world leaders and luminaries and, true icons of business. I don't just mean political leaders, but by the end of the day, your voice gets really raspy from talking so much. So make sure you drink a lot of water.
Lynn, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to go off and bring up Ina Fried, my colleague.
Hi everyone, I'm Ina Fried, Chief Technology Correspondent at Axios and author of our daily AI Plus newsletter. If you don't get it, go to axios.com/newsletters. I'll be in your inbox, it'll be great. With me is the incomparable Julie Sweet from Accenture. Julie, it's really good to have you here because I think, everyone, I don't think there's any debate. I'm not even going to ask people to raise hands that AI is big, it's going to change everything. That's what they're spending a lot of time thinking about. It's the how that gets everyone stuck. And last year, y'all did this great thing. We wrote about it. It was like a boot camp, kind of, here's what you need to know about generative AI. We were talking, you're saying companies kind of understand the technology. The big question now is, how do they actually incorporate it into what they do? And I really, personally, and I don't generally feel for businesses. They do fine. They make lots of money. But I do kind of feel for companies because the technology is changing so fast. And businesses are made up of humans, and we only change at a different pace, and it's not the same. How do businesses possibly keep up, and what are the recommendations? I'm sure you're hearing from CEOs that come to you and say, what on earth do I do?
Well, it's a great question. First of all, it's great to be here. Thank you. And what's interesting is if you can contrast last year before we get to kind of the how, is last year we were doing workshops, really trying to make sure everyone understood the power of AI. And last year, agentic digital agents was not the buzz it is now, right? So two things happened over the last year. On the one hand, people do really get it now. Like, you know, we don't need to, we're not doing those workshops this year, right? Instead, we're showcasing actual examples of AI creating value at scale, because that's what everyone's now saying, okay, we get it, but how do you make it actually work? On the other hand, the technology has gotten more and more complicated in a year. And it's those two things that make it so hard, because on the one hand, the technology is getting better and better, but then, you know, you have to keep up with it, and you have to say, you know, am I creating the right platform for like what's coming next? And on the other hand, actually, if you look under the covers as to why the companies who are getting value out of it are getting value, it's not about the technology. It's because those companies have been willing to really change the way they work, and I'll give you some examples of that. They're changing their talent, and in addition to the really cool AI technology, every company that's really scaling and getting real value now has been investing in years in the prerequisites of technology, like the cloud and the data. And so, you know, all of you came here and had to book a hotel. Like, in the hotel industry, there's now some real examples that are going to change your experience. It probably didn't change your experience for Davos.
It's not going to help you get a spot in Davos.
It is not going to help you here.
Other travel.
Yes, right. But so like Radisson Hotels now has always done a great job and done a lot of digital and personalization. But now when you go to book a ski vacation, they are able to show you pictures of the resort in real time, knowing that you actually ski versus someone else who's going on a ski vacation is booking it and they really like the spa. And so what comes up for them are like the pictures of the spa, right? Completely different experience, right? When you're now buying a car, working with a global automobile maker, we've had like, you're able to like build cars for a while, but now when you go to build your car, they know, well, you bought these kinds of seats and you like this kind of thing, and so you're starting without all of these, you know, names and confusion, massively simplifying. And these companies are getting real results, like numbers that actually are material and matter, right? Both of these companies, though, have been investing for a long time in digital, and when they looked at this, it completely changed like how their marketing department worked. They're getting 50% more productivity in marketing, which means they completely reorganized it to use the tools differently. And so when you think about the how, right, of course you have to understand the technology, and that's hard, and you have to partner, and that's difficult. But the biggest how is actually understanding that the value comes in, understanding your business processes, how your talent has to change, and being willing to change. And that can be the hardest piece.
Without asking you to totally name and shame, what are some things that aren't working? Give us some examples of some things you've seen, either from clients before they came to you or things that you tried that didn't work out. Because even the best, not everything works out. You guys are fabulous. What isn't working with AI?
The number one problem is when companies are not willing to actually change the way they work. So what do I mean by that? We sometimes say that it gives you more coffee time, because Gen AI in particular tends to not take out an entire job. It will change tasks. And most companies are not able to look at their talent and say, well, if these tasks are eliminated, so these 10 people have now saved, how do I rework this department so that maybe I now need 8 and I free up 2 to do something else? Like sales is a great example. There's so much you can do in field sales and consumer goods, because almost 50% of that job is actually administrative. But when you free up that time, you have to then think about like, okay, well, I now need, what are those people going to do with that time? Am I going to do less? Am I going to redeploy more? And if they're not doing administrative work, which I've been hiring for, do they have the skills to now build better relationships? That requires a whole different way of thinking about skills, about HR, about recruiting, about the business strategy. none of that has to do with the underlying technology that enabled it.
One
right?
of your rivals actually put it really well at DLD, saying the biggest beneficiaries so far have been the dogs of software developers, because people are getting home 20 minutes earlier and getting to walk the dog. And it really is, I mean, it's a funny point, but it highlights that, and I think it's also the flip side of that is why companies are hesitant to keep writing giant checks. One of the things we've been reporting is a lot of the software makers, Microsoft and Google, had initially positioned their business as pay us an extra $30 per month, get this business Copilot, and they're now doing pricing things where they're saying, okay, we're going to raise Office or raise Google Workspace by a couple bucks and give it to everyone, because what they're hearing is, it's not that companies are saying, look, $30 a month per worker, if we get a little bit more out of them, you can make that pay off. But at the same time, it's a big check. And it's a big check when you can't say, I know I'm going to get this. I assume you're also hearing that from CEOs on the cost-conscious side?
Yeah, well, I mean, there isn't really an industry today that's not cost-conscious. It may be for different reasons, right? So the energy industry is doing better and has to invest trillions of dollars for the energy transition, right? So versus consumer goods where gross margins are pressured and they can't get pricing. So every industry has costs, and IT budgets are not changing. It's even though the value is there, people are not saying, well, therefore I'm going to double what I'm spending, right? They're reevaluating, and that's where I think the technology companies are recognizing that there are constraints to adoption around cost right now until companies are where they need to be. Most companies today are not AI ready. I mean, we estimate that about 10% of, say, the G2000 actually have the data and the infrastructure that they could, if they wanted to, take AI across the company. So think about all the investments that have to be done just to get ready. I also think, though, that there's a thoughtfulness as people are starting to say, we've got a lot of examples, but when I think about scaling, they're starting to understand the new capabilities they need to have. Like, for example, reinventing HR. So first of all, if Gen AI is not going to replace whole roles but tasks, then you have to look at your people from a skills lens. Almost no companies in the world have skills as the primary currency for HR. We do at Accenture. I have almost 800,000 people. We have a skills database. I can tell you how many people have Gen AI, how many people know SAP, how many people with this industry, and what the skills are so that we can upskill and change. But that's a complete different way of doing HR. Then there's, of course, digital agents. Those are digital employees. They actually have to be onboarded. They have to be trained with your data. They'll have job titles. They have to have guardrails like compliance because they're going to be doing tasks that humans did, and they have to follow the same policies. That's a totally different way of thinking about technology because they have to follow things that your human employees are following. And then on top of that, change. How do you get comfortable? We just published a blog today about using digital agents in marketing and the journey that is from the lens of our chief marketing officer, from the lens of talent and change, and then from the lens of technology. What we found was that one of the best ways to get people excited about having someone help them in their work was the feedback loop, because we created the digital agent so that the person who's now being augmented by them can provide continuous feedback. And for our employees, when they realized that they could give feedback, the agent would learn, and their job was getting easier and easier so they could focus on things that they want to focus on. Like for marketing, we're now getting campaigns 30 to 40% faster to market, taking out a lot of the stuff that our marketing people didn't want to do so they can spend more time. But what was key to the change was not me telling them that. It was, wait a minute, this agent is someone, it's almost like I can tutor them and they're going to get better and better. And that was really exciting. That took a very different way. That was not taking a playbook on like, let me train you how to do an agent.
I want to talk about agents. I want to really dive into that because that's this year's buzzword. How many people have heard more than they want to hear? How many people have heard the word agent more times than they would care to say? And how many people actually think they have a good handle on what an agent is or what it's going to do for them? Yeah, that's where I think we are. So talk about what it means in terms of real world examples. And also, I guess before we even talk about what it means, I mean, agents basically, Copilot helps a human being work better, work faster. There's only so much you can augment a human. So the appeal of agents is you've got the computers themselves doing tasks semi-autonomously with some level of human oversight. I guess my first question, are we really ready for that? Like, it doesn't feel like on the technology side, and then we'll get on the people side, but on the technology side, is the technology really good enough to be set free to be an agent?
So, let me tell you a real example from 2 nights ago. So, as you imagine, when the CEO reaches out to the general counsel and says, "Hey, I need you to have someone go talk to these guys, and we need to, we need to coach our team on like not sharing any confidential information." Like everyone jumps, right? So, it was incredible. Our intellectual property lawyer has built an agent, and within seconds generated the talking points for the senior leader that they needed to coach, because this had to happen very quickly. And that was done with an agent. And I'm a former lawyer, always a lawyer, I guess.
Recovering.
Right, a recovering lawyer. So my general counsel says, "You got to see this." And he sends it to me. We used to work together at a law firm. And he sends it to me. And like, this was done like from the time I asked, within like an hour, I was getting these incredible talking points for which I had absolutely no changes, which is unusual as a lawyer. And you're like, okay, like, no, so think about your job. If you could have someone who's super smart, who learns from you, take the most mundane things and be able to do it and be more responsive. Because at the end of the day, that wasn't like rocket science. And yet, in the old world, someone would have sat down, they would have asked, they said, "Oh, let's go get some, let's pull the last ones, right? Let's like do it." And it would have taken longer.
It's a great example. At the same time, to me, that's like maybe a mini agent or lowercase a to me, where it's still providing information back to a human being, it's not taking action. Is that what we're really talking about this year with agents? Because where I get worried is I think of an agent as it's going to go off and book that hotel. It's going to take that action. And then even scarier is pretty soon an agent's talking to an agent. And that's where I feel like maybe the technology isn't there. Maybe it's
See, and so it all depends on the use case, right? Because the technology is growing. So we're using remember I talked about agents in marketing. So we're using it today. So when we would put out something, a new thought leadership piece, which I hope you all read, right? We would have someone who does the quality. There's someone who looks at it and says, is it really a differentiated message? What are our competitors doing? It's a several-week process, right? We have agents who are talking to each other, right? Who do quality, who go out and do the analytics, who give a score to whether it's differentiated. And now our marketing people are spending their time on getting the right content, working with that, and then within minutes being told, well, yeah, no, that's differentiated, that's not. And that is all taking those 14 agents talking to each other, interacting. The technology's there for now. Where are things going? So we just announced with Keon, which is a supply chain solution company that think about like things in warehouses, right? Robotics in warehouses and automation. We just announced the first of its kind use of physical AI with agents that can sense gravity, that can do this, that are going to cut down the use of manual labor in warehouses and create more safety. That's brand new, right? So is that ready to go? No, but it's being implemented. It's going to be learning. So the technology is there already to do this, and it's going to move really fast. What's not really ready is the data to feed it and the organizations to actually operate differently. When you ask about challenges, one of the things is we still do most use cases are single function use cases because companies are not looking across. And the value comes from like actually reimagining how you're working. And so I think that the technology is and will be ready faster than the organizations are ready to change necessarily, which of course is what we work a lot on.
So we have about a minute left. Last year I came away from Davos and I wrote a piece saying AI, autonomous agents are the next big thing. So I feel good, pat myself on
You
the
should feel
back.
very good.
What are we going to be talking about next year? Where are things headed?
Physical AI and robotics will be next year.
You heard it here first. I also want to give you a chance. Give us all some homework. What's a good use of an hour or two if I want to be smarter about AI?
Actually go use it. So, there's easy ways to build agents now on the public platforms. And yes, they're little a agents, but it begins to actually understand, because one of the most important things is we are going to change the way we operate. And as leaders, if we don't, we will not be able to bring our people along. And I think the reason why you have to touch and feel it yourself is we need to be able to invest in our people and help them take the journey so that this is a net benefit for our employees. And this is one of those things where it can't be bottom up. If the leaders don't change, we won't invest enough. We won't bring our people along the journey. And for that, you have to understand it at a much deeper level than we currently have our leadership.
Great advice, as always. Thank you so much, Julie Sweet.
Thanks for having me.
And now I'd like to invite up Nick Johnston, our publisher, I believe.
Ina, you know who I am. You don't believe. That's who I am. Hi, I'm Nicholas Johnston. I'm the publisher of Axios. Thank you so much for being here today. Everything that we're doing all week at Axios, all the awesome conversations we're a part of, wouldn't be possible without the support of our partners. So we're hugely grateful to Lightspeed Venture Partners for hosting us today at the Lighthouse. And I'm happy to be joined for a view from the top conversation by Glean CEO and co-founder Arvind Jain. Arvind, welcome to the Lighthouse. Good to see you. Welcome to Davos. Let's start big picture. Tell us a little bit about Glean and your journey that got you here today.
Yeah, so Glean is a AI search company, so you can think of it like Google or ChatGPT, but inside your company. Glean connects with all of your company's data, and then it's ready to help your employees get answers to their questions that can be answered using your internal company's data and knowledge. So that's what we do. We got started in 2019, which makes us probably the first enterprise company that brought the transformer technology, into the businesses. And our journey for why we got started was it's a day old age old problem. All of us struggle to find information inside our company, as knowledge workers. And I was struggling with it myself, at my previous startup, Rubrik. Got frustrated enough to actually start the company.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about AI augmenting the human experience. Julie just talked about that, how she uses it. Dig in a little bit deeper to what's your vision for that and the role AI can play as almost like a partner to the knowledge worker.
Yeah, well, in fact, and that's a great question. If you think about AI today, a lot of conversation is about efficiency. It's about replacement. How can I not have this customer service agent or this HR professional who's answering people's questions? How can I get AI to do it? And I feel that's actually a very small part of what AI is going to be doing for us, in our world. A lot of what AI is going to enable, is new things, new products that we're going to build, new design for our companies. And that's the thing that, I'm most excited about, how humans can actually use AI to do things that they couldn't do before, as opposed to just having this limited view of that AI can actually do something that I can do today.
That's very interesting. The way I think about it, I'm trying to follow Julie's advice is try and test it every day. And I'm taking things I do already and trying to have AI do it for me. Your angle is a little bit different. How should we think about doing things we don't even do now and giving it to AI?
Yeah. Well, I'll give some examples. So one, I think everybody can start to feel more powerful with AI. It's part of working with AI, doing things that you couldn't do before. I'll give you one example. I'm always worried in my company that people are meeting each other all the time and they're not writing enough code. And so I had this question for the last 4 years, 5 years, that how many meetings do we have on a daily basis? How many of them have more than 5 people in it? Because I feel they're all waste of time.
Right.
And so, but I couldn't actually get I can't sanction a project for somebody to do that analysis and look at our calendar data and get all of those answers. But now I feel capable. I can just go and ask Glean internally this question. It connects with our calendar data. It's able to actually get that dump, do some data analysis on it, write code on the fly, all of those things, which I don't have to do. Like, I'm not actually acting like an engineer when I do that.
It's not something you would have done before. It's something it would have been impossible, essentially, without that
Absolutely,
kind of technology.
As I said, I was waiting for 4 years to get the answer to that. Yeah.
There's a word you've used in our conversations about like a fulfilling work experience. What do you mean by that as far as bringing AI into the workplace?
Yeah. Well, a lot of as knowledge workers, we're supposed to have an advanced job, something that needs intellect, but we end up spending 80%, 90% of our time doing things which are, sort of
not advanced,
boring and repetitive, and
right.
And so I think that's the thing that I feel like AI is going to be really good at. Like anything that repeats, that's done a lot. AI technology is sort of meant to be really, really good at sort of replicating that behavior for us. So what I see in the future is this place where we can actually spend a lot more time doing creative things.
I've thought about a little bit this. Like there's tasks that arrive at me and I'm like, I don't want to do this. And that's when the light bulb goes off. Maybe I can ask a robot to help me.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that, and this is a huge topic I think for all AI conversations this week in Davos, is that relationship between AI augmenting workers or AI replacing workers. Walk us through your thinking on that.
Yeah. So I think ultimately, and if you look at predictions with AI, I read a report yesterday, which says that there's going to be 150 million new jobs that are going to be created, and there's going to be 90 million jobs that are going to be displaced. So overall, we are still talking about humans are going to have jobs. We're going to be doing something. We're not going to the beach and have AI agents run companies, behind the scenes. So that's not the world we are heading towards. So what does it mean for us? It means that a lot of what AI is going to be doing is it's going to actually play a role of an assistant for us as humans. We will still be the the masters that drive this technology, and it just allows us to do more things.
Yeah, as a human, I'm very pro-human in this discussion, and so I feel like you're coming down as keeping the human in the loop. This is something that is a tool for that, but the final decision making is still the human sitting on the top.
Yeah.
Spin this forward. Look ahead for us next year and years beyond. What is coming over the horizon? What are you excited about? What are the new technologies and enhancements that's on your radar?
Yeah. So one thing I think the industry has gotten really good at talking about the art of the possible already with AI. Everything that we hear in the market about autonomous agents and agents talking to each other, which people are talking about right now, we find it very, very hard to actually make that a reality. So I think so part of it is what's going to be coming this year is I think hopefully everything that you hear today, which people are already selling products, they're all actually starting to work at not just in POCs but in production scale. So I think the big thing for 2025 is one, we will see a significant amount of automation that will be driven through agents. And these are not going to be agents that are completely autonomous. Even if a human is in the loop, you can easily drive 90% more efficiency than today, with humans in the loop. So we are very content with building agents, where the humans.
And so that's empowering an agent to go and make those decisions, but then have to come back to the human and check in at certain types of it. I want to take the flip side of all the optimism, and there's a lot of concerns about security and trust with these kinds of tools because they're so powerful. Tell us how to think about that, and how should we be vigilant as these become more important?
Yeah. So first, I think when you think about within the enterprise, AI systems that you build, you have to be careful in terms of AI should not actually create new problems for you. As an example, imagine you connected all of your enterprise data and knowledge, gave one agent access to all of that information.
Which is a lot, and it's important information, right?
Yeah, and then this agent is serving everybody in the company. Well, now, I can get access to information that I was never supposed to. So that's the first thing that you have to solve. When you actually build these agents, you have to understand, the governance model that you have within the enterprise, make sure that any AI system that you deploy follows and obeys, that model.
Is that almost like baking into the construction of these agents a sense of caution, your meeting idea? Well, let's analyze all the meetings. Well, now I can see who's in those meetings, and that should be something you probably shouldn't share all over.
Exactly. So it has to respect, the permissions and the governance of information that you have already established in the enterprise.
Be
Like
aware
AI
of the power and then keep those rules. And
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
We're about to get the hook here, but you at Axios would like to end on one fun thing. At Davos, I make that one Davos thing. This is your first visit to Davos.
Yes.
Welcome.
Yeah.
What's your impression so far? What are you excited about for the week?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I think this is a great event. I think it's a combination of, like, I feel like I'm on vacation at the same time as actually, getting some business done. So that's the most exciting
I'm certainly
part.
watching people on vacation.
Yeah. And then I think I was actually, people told me it's going to be very, very cold. So I'm actually pleasantly surprised at how good the weather is.
That's true. The weather is great this year. This is awesome. Arvin, thanks so much for the time. Lightspeed, thanks you so much for hosting us. Stick around. I'm going to bring Ina back up for the big finish.
Thank you.
Thanks. You go up this way.
Thanks, Nick. I'd like to welcome up an amazing return guest here for us, and we always have great conversations. The COO of Google DeepMind, Lila Ibrahim.
Thank you.
This moment, like all these other moments we've had in AI, it feels like, you hear so much in terms of, super AGI, super intelligence is around the corner. At the same time, people are like, it's overhyped. And you're in such an interesting place because you're really looking at the big things AI can do around science, drug discovery, all these things. Maybe a good place to start us off is to talk about where are we? What is actually happening today with the technology that your company really helped pioneer?
Well, thank you, Ina, for having me here and starting off with such a simple question like that.
Yeah, always here to help.
Let's see. So, I think we're still in the very early days of artificial intelligence in many ways, even though it's all around us. I see some folks on their phones. If you have an Android phone and you have a longer battery life, you can thank AI for that. Your movie recommendations, song recommendations, that's all driven by AI. We just don't call it AI. And so I think in many ways, there's parts of AI that are really well integrated into
I have
audience
heard
experiences.
people say that, AI is always when something is new. Like
Yes.
once it's actually in use, people
And
don't call it
useful.
AI.
Right, exactly. And that's why we're still at the generative AI,
Right.
because we're still learning how to make it really useful. And so I think what's been interesting the past few years is generative AI has really captured the imagination of what we might be able to do with a next generation technology tool. And what we saw over the past year was AI became more multimodal. That meant you can put in text, you can put in voice, images, you can get out video. So this aspect of having many ways of interacting with the technologies, much like we do with other human beings, has really changed how we think about generative AI. But generative AI, and there's still a lot to do, by the way, on generative AI. Anyone type in anything into generative AI and get something not factual, right? Yeah, I see a lot of heads nodding. We need to make it more factual. We need to think about how do we bring in things like memory or reasoning in a multimodal way as well. So there's still a lot of work to do in order to make it more of an assistive technology. It's a lot of value today, but there's still work to do. And there's work around in the fundamental research of how to improve AI as a field, as a science in of itself. The area I'm particularly excited about is using AI for scientific discovery. Much like, think about it as like the next generation of a microscope or telescope. Like, how can we understand the universe around us? And if we better understand the universe, can we unlock possible solutions to things like healthcare and diseases, to climate, to food security and crops? So I think there's a lot of really interesting things right now. We've already demonstrated that we can use AI for scientific discovery.
And where are we with that? Because I hear that all the time. I hear it's going to help us discover new drugs, find new materials, that sort of thing. And then I hear people say it hasn't actually discovered anything new yet. Like it's not, which isn't a dig in the sense of, it's programmed with existing human knowledge. It's great at finding things that we already know, but it's hard to think of today an LLM, is it true discovery if it's finding a pattern that we haven't seen? My sense is that's really what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, and maybe what I'll do is I'll give an example of AlphaFold, which is an advanced AI system that we developed and about 4 years ago. And it predicts the 3D structure of a protein. Now, why is that important? Because diseases like, Parkinson's or even malaria, these are protein-based diseases. So we can also use proteins to help deal with industrial waste. So there was a 50-year grand challenge in the field of science of can you predict a 3D structure of a protein? And if you can understand it as a basic building block of life and how to address some of these issues. Every year, it would take, actually not every year, it would take a PhD student about 4 to 5 years to understand a single protein. We published a database with all 200 million plus known proteins known to humankind, where it's as simple as like a search or a map search. You type something in, it gives you the predicted 3D structure, and made that freely available to scientists worldwide. What's significant about that now is we've basically taken 1 billion years of PhD time and shrunk it into a database that's accessible. And in fact, we have 2.7 million researchers who knew there were that many looking for protein folding in 190 countries using this tool now to advance things like understanding diseases, which we can now work on therapeutics, including some of the neglected diseases in the global south that were underfunded. There's also work happening on like why are some crops more resistant to disease than others. And then work, as I mentioned, in dealing with industrial waste. The University of Portsmouth in the UK is actually working on plastic-eating enzymes and accelerating their work in that space. So we've been actually quite surprised by what this has unlocked and being used in areas that we could never have imagined. In fact, we're also excited because last year it was awarded with a Nobel Prize, the first time in history that a Nobel Prize was awarded to an application of AI. And I think this is entering a new era of discovery now. So your question of like, how far are we? I think we're still somewhat in the early days, but we are showing progress in this, and it's not just protein folding. There's work happening with like 15-day weather forecasting, which you can now predict the trail of a hurricane. There's work happening in material science discovery now in the hands of researchers worldwide, saying which ones can help us actually advance battery technology for electric vehicles, work with supercomputers. So I think we're kind of in this new era of discovery.
And a lot of the talk this year is agents, really allowing these tools not just to give information back to humans, taking action on their own. How do you feel in terms of, are we really ready to give, as you pointed out, it's still sometimes, giving us hallucinations. I still feel like if I use Gemini, if I use ChatGPT, any of the tools, I'm going to get back a lot of useful information. But if I really am going to rely on it, I got to go do a quick Google search and make sure it's not making something up. It feels to me like an agent isn't going to do that. It could. That's the thing. An agent could go back, do a Google search, make sure. But how ready is the underlying technology, to be given these new powers?
Yeah, I think there's two parts to that. How ready is the technology, and how ready are we as humans?
For sure.
Last year, we did a technology demonstration around Project Astra, which is a research platform which introduces agentic features. And this basically means, as Ina mentioned, being able to take actions, but you as the person still has control and approves any action that's taken. And that might be something like you're planning a trip and you want to add it to your calendar, or you want to purchase tickets, activities like that, which I really want for planning my kids' summer holidays, but maybe at some point in the future.
But you still today, you want to be able to hit that button before your credit card gets billed.
Exactly. So we demonstrated this technology last year, and in fact, when we demonstrated it, we had also spent years in advance doing ethics research work on the ethics of advanced AI assistants, so that we as a technology community, as well as a broader community, can talk about both the opportunities and the risks, because we know that there are a lot of questions that come up. So we are starting to make progress. We have it in the hands of testers starting at the end of last year. externally to try to see how this can work. But to the point we were talking about just now, of like there's still a lot of work technologically we need to work through, and as a society, and thinking about how do we want to how do we right-size regulation to have both the opportunity while still mitigating the risk. And I would say, part of my job as Chief Operating Officer, which basically means I oversee the operations, but also all of our responsibility and frontier safety work and how we collaborate externally. And this is part of my job, is to worry every day about how do we actually maximize the benefits while managing the risks. And I can tell you, AI is not slowing down. We all know that. And so I think it's a matter of like, how do we engage and collaborate early on in the process so that we're building this technology with communities involved, so that the technology is happening with us all and not to us all, so that we retain agency in this.
Well, and I do feel we have this moment, like the technology's here, we're getting it. For better or worse, it was released at a pretty early stage, which has the benefit of we're all getting to kind of see it and develop along with it. But we do have, even the most skeptical people are saying the really powerful stuff isn't that far off. Regulation has moved fast for regulation, but slow considering how fast AI is moving. I just read the new president repealed the executive order on AI. So now in the United States, we have no federal regulation. That seems like we're moving in the wrong direction. Am I wrong?
There's definitely a lot of changes happening. I think I think everyone's still processing the changes, but we're a global organization and we work through changes across the world all the time, with administration changes, as well as evolution with the EU AI Act. And in fact, this morning I had breakfast with several ministers, and they were kind of sharing best practices about how they're bringing the technology into their communities. And I think also recognizing that there's still a lot, in many ways we feel like everybody has access, but also there's still a lot of people we risk leaving behind. So how do we ensure too that we are, for students, like this is one of my big passion areas of how are we making sure that the generation that has AI as part of their everyday life, that they're actually learning how to use this technology responsibly.
And you all did support the original executive order on AI. That was praised as a positive step, right?
Yeah, well, it was a lot of change. And yes, we did support it, and we put a lot of structures in place within Google DeepMind. But I think a lot of that was already built into the ethos of the organization. So for those of you who don't know, DeepMind was founded in 2000, acquired by Google in 2014. So we had a set of AI principles. We've operationalized that. In fact, it was one of my first focuses in the job when I started 7 years ago, of how do you operationalize care in a research-driven organization, which is a lot about having the right internal processes, engaging external communities, doing the testing, thinking about how you deploy this. Regardless of different administrations around the world, this is something that we continue to be committed to.
And how confident are you, because it's not just about what Google DeepMind does. One of the things we've seen is the best in the field, like others, are quickly able to kind of match similar progress. It might change as we change techniques. The sort of sucking up everything on the human internet phase, everyone was able to kind of catch up and get to a pretty good place. How confident are you, and I know we're out of time, but how confident are you that we are going to use AI to benefit humanity, and that we're not going to increase income inequality, leave more people behind, sort of create a world that, even if it's better for some, isn't better for all?
Well, I think it's actually up to all of us as humans and as society to have these types of conversations. I think I've been quite surprised by the pace in which everything is moving, and how every conversation now we have seems to be around AI. I think one of the benefits of that is holding us all to account on, yes, we have to mitigate the risk, and how do we also make sure that we're highlighting the potential benefits and making the right types of investments. There's a lot of work that needs to happen, I think, across governments, society, academia, scientific community, if we're going to have the impact that we want to have. And if we don't take the care now, because of the pace in which it's moving, it's going to be harder to do later on.
Well, thank you so much, Lila. As I said, unfortunately, we're out of time, but to be continued. Stay, mingle, talk. Be sure to come back to Lighthouse. We have great programming all week. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ina. Thank you all.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Great to see you.
Thank you.